Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to First Person, the show where we meet the most interesting people in IT and learn from them what makes them tick by focusing only on their firsts. I'm your host, Matt Egan, asking you to enjoy, like, and subscribe wherever you find us. And if you're an interesting person in IT, let us know. You might be the next first person. The next voice you hear will be today's guest. She is Emma Philpott MBE. In a varied career, Emma has been an academic, cybersecurity expert, and business leader. Emma is definitely one of the most interesting people in IT, and we are delighted to have her as a guest on First Person. So, Emma, welcome.
Thank
And
you.
first, um, what is the first thing people should know about you?
Well, so probably that I'm actually quite short, and that surprises people when they've only talked to me on Teams, and that I can get very, very loud, particularly when I'm passionate about something. So I often, whenever I give a talk somewhere, I can usually see the AV people frantically trying to turn me down as I get going, and yeah, so that I don't deafen people. So that's really what people should know about me. Be warned about me before they meet me.
Interesting. I feel there should be somebody somewhere should be studying people's perceptions of height and size based on this world we now live in, where we meet and interact with people on
Yeah.
screen. I won't say who, but I have a colleague of long standing, but who actually we started working together in the very early weeks of 2020, and he's in the States and I'm in the UK. The first time we met, which was 2 years later, the first thing he said for me was, "I thought you were tiny." And I to this day, and we're good friends, but to this day, I do not know what to make, of that, but there you go. Excellent.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. So, section 1 is what we like to call first things first, and this is where we like to get to know our guest by understanding some of their first times. So, Emma, I'm really interested to find out about your first job in I'm gonna say your first job in IT, but I understand given your varied career, that might be kind of a loose term. But tell us something about your first job in this industry.
Okay. Well, so as you said, I didn't really work in IT. I worked I was a material scientist, and then we happened to move to Malvern, and it was just at that financial disaster. So I was like an expert in nanotechnology, and no one
Ah,
wanted nanotechnology because there was no money. So, but I was like hanging out in Malvern, and everyone I met worked for a small cybersecurity company. And I was like, what's that? And then I just decided to, because I didn't really have anything else going on, I was looking for jobs. I decided to just arrange just a free meetup of people working in cybersecurity. And it was just sometimes things happen. It was just the right time, the right place. Everyone came together and they were all sparking off each other and they didn't know each other, even though they were small companies in the same industry. And so that was a really exciting moment. So that was kind of my first job. But then out of that, I found IASME, which of course I helped found. And so kind of my current job was my first job in IT.
yeah. But
So yeah.
it's interesting to me, we talk often to people, successful people in what we might broadly call the IT industry, and so many of them, have a background that isn't specific to IT, but is specific to, let's say, curiosity, right? Like we meet a lot of people who've got some academic background, a lot of scientists, a lot of mathematicians. But one of the themes that seems to thread through this is, you know, the opportunity feels kind of arbitrary in some ways, but you took advantage of it, right? Like you were the person who pulled those people together. You were interested and curious in what they were interested in, um, and yet here we are. Many years
Yes.
later. It's
I think
it's
also
all
optimism. I think optimism is a very
yeah.
strong thread, and and I think if you're a natural optimist, it's really lucky. So I'm a natural optimist, and I always I get excited by change, even
Uh-huh.
change that seems bad. I get excited because there's usually good things that come out of it. So
Yeah.
even though I couldn't get a job, no one wanted to invest in nanotechnology. Amazing things came out of it because I was having to do stuff because I was bored. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's exciting.
And did you find, you're meeting these people who are, I guess, cybersecurity professionals if they're running
Mhm.
organizations. I mean, the deep knowledge you had around nanotechnology must have been at least somewhat relevant to those conversations, even if you're not deeply technically into the security side of things.
So I don't think I've ever had any deep knowledge about anything. I just I just kind of know a bit, enough to
Yeah.
get by, and I know experts. I
Mhm.
know people who know, and I trust them. So as long as I know people I can ask, I don't really feel like I need to
Yeah.
know much about anything. So, I've got a PhD, I've got a degree in material science. You know, I've never really known much about anything, to be honest. So
You should be. Yeah.
going from material science to cybersecurity, it's fine as long as you know experts that really know their stuff
Mhm.
and are willing to share that with you, then, I think it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you should you definitely sound like a journalist, which but it's also again, it's an interesting trend that we see in very successful people often is that, curiosity to learn more, interesting learning more, and knowledge of the end of your own, limits, right? Like understanding that you might not be the expert, and that's a good thing, actually, if you're
Yes.
interested in people and in developing good things. And so, I mean, I'm really intrigued in this. You've built this group of people together. From that, you've created an organization. I guess pretty quickly then you're thinking, this is something, right? This is a part of an industry that could be for me."
Yes. So that's when I knew the industry was for me, when I had this group of amazing, clever, potential people. But I never like to go into a crowded market. If someone is doing something, I don't need to compete with them. I don't want to do that. I want to do something new. And what I saw was that there was no one bringing together these small companies working in cybersecurity. There was no one championing them. So it was at that time it was an environment that was very much led by the big company, the
Mhm,
primes. They got all the work and they body shopped the small companies, or they allowed them in. And so I get very passionate about justice
mhm,
and being fair. And to me, that didn't really feel fair. So that's when I really found my calling in that,
right,
wow, these entrepreneurs, these people doing amazing things, they need a voice. So that's really where I started. And we set up in Malvern, and then we set up around the country to lots of other different clusters. So it was this big network of small companies working in cybersecurity. And that was great. But out of that, I found the two people that I then started IASME with.
right.
So I was doing this network, and then I started IASME, and then IASME started to really grow, became very, very busy. And I found I was doing the network at weekends, you
Ah,
know, and it also, because we'd got different clusters around the country, it became just being referee between the different cluster managers. Oh, someone wants to set up there and they're too close to me. So I stopped all that. And I think this is another thing, that things don't work in life, and I never really see that as a problem.
mhm,
That's a natural thing. You try something, it doesn't work. You try something else, it
yeah.
doesn't work. So, yeah, so in the end, I stopped that, and I moved on to IASME, which is the company that I've been running for the last 12 years.
So, yeah, I mean, and we were gonna get onto those failures soon because I think that's that's a really important
Yeah.
in success is, like, understanding when something isn't working and knowing when to move on. Um, One of the questions we like to ask at this stage is to ask someone about their first great boss or their first great mentor. And I wonder if, from what you're describing, maybe this is more about kind of peer relationships and learning from everybody around you, or was there at any point, that great boss or mentor who helped you along the way, or maybe it's a combination of both, right?
Yeah, so I did have a great boss. At one point in my career, I felt very frustrated because I was a young woman who looked younger than I was, working in
Mhm,
a mainly male environment. So I worked for the Ministry of Defence and Kinetic, which is the defence agency. So it was usually I was the only woman, and I looked young. And I also, I'm sure, believed that I was more capable than I was. you know, Common theme. I could do my boss's
yeah,
job, no problem.
yeah.
And I felt really frustrated because there was definitely a feeling that I didn't look like a manager. I didn't come
Mhm,
across as a manager. I came across dippy, and I've always looked slightly scruffy. I don't. have that kind of sophisticated boardroom, like, "Oh, there's a boss." It's like, "Who's that slightly scruffy girl?" So, I was feeling really frustrated at one point, and then, my boss, who was a senior manager in the Structural Materials Centre, John Morton, he was a completely different kind of boss, and he just said, "If you can do it, I'll let you do it." You know
Mhm.
you know, I don't really care how you come across, what you look like. I'll just keep letting you do it until you can't do it. And to me, that was just amazing.
Yeah.
And he just was very single-minded. So he was not for everybody, but he was very single-minded. He would envisage change and then he would drive it through.
Right.
And I think a lot of the way that I manage and a lot of the way that I manage a company now is very much influenced by that. You know, trust people. Don't go on what, their qualifications are and
Yeah.
what they look like. If someone can do a job, let them do the job. So,
Yeah.
and trust them. So, yeah, and drive through change. I like change.
Well, it's just as well if you're working in the industry, we're both working in, and some really kind of valuable points in there, right? That's a boss who's able to recognize talent and potential and provides a supporting platform for it, which is kind of the definition of a boss, really.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
whilst also having the vision to understand where we need to get to, right, as a team. And I loved when you said, he wasn't for everybody, and I don't know this person, right? Um, I think a truly great
Hi,
manager
John, if you're looking.
but a truly great manager and leader kind of feels like that anyway, right? So I think
Yeah.
about in my own career, um, very early on, like having a really good mentor, is a good friend now, who exactly the same sort of thing was like, we need to get from here to there. It's somewhat critical, but it's not mission critical immediately. Go do it kind of thing. Make mistakes, figure it out, get there. For some things. For other things, can't do that, right? We need more kind of um, and it was only subsequently I realized he wasn't managing everybody in the same way, right? He just recognized in me that was a thing I needed. And I try to take that all the time in my own kind of management and
Yeah,
leadership. I try to. I think I fail because I think often we want to manage people how we want to be managed, which
yeah.
isn't necessarily the way it should work.
It is hard.
But that's good and that's exciting and that's great. But I'm not here just for the good stuff, right?
Oh,
So
no.
you've already trailed this, but let's move on to section two, which we call first fails. So we're not on
Yeah.
here for good stuff. We I think, and sense you agree with this. I think we learn more from our mistakes as long as we're kind of open to that. And it's interesting when we have these conversations, we often find that people acknowledge many mistakes, but there might be just that one that that keeps you awake at
Mhm.
night. But I don't know if you Emma can tell us something about a first big mistake that you can recall.
So, I find it really hard to remember my mistakes.
That's a
Not
good thing.
because I think that I don't make them, but because I make them all the time.
Mhm.
But rather than so if you're going down a path and you take a wrong turning, it just becomes a different journey. It's not necessarily a wrong thing. So you didn't mean to do it, but it did it. And so, for example, when I did a PhD, I did a PhD while I was working, and I am not cut out for a PhD. So it was a mistake, you would think, but I got so many benefits from doing it. So when we lived in Singapore, I probably couldn't have got a job without having a PhD.
Right.
It made me understand what having a PhD meant, and it made me better at writing because, of course, you have to write up. So I'm glad I did, but at the time it was a mistake, and
Right.
it's everything. The only things that I lie awake at night and regret are the things like when you reply to all, and I've done this. You reply to all and you say something really bad,
Mhm.
thinking you're replying to one person. And I've done that a handful of times where I've done it and I've just thought, oh, no, you just want to die.
Yeah.
You can't even look the person in the eye next time you see
Yeah.
them. So those small times where I have probably offended somebody or upset somebody are the only real times that I really regret.
Yeah.
Everything else I make mistakes all the time, but my optimism carries me forward. And it's almost like I don't, you know, I am so excited about the future, whatever I've done, that I don't notice all the wrong turns that I've made. And it turns out that it's just a meandering path rather
Yeah,
than a straight path.
it
And,
is.
and it's exciting. It's fine.
Yeah. It's a dance, not a race, as a boss of mine once said many years ago, and I think
Exactly.
that's very true, and taking that attitude, like, helps an awful lot in turning everything into an opportunity.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think people can overplan. They can
yes,
decide on their career, and they'll have it all mapped out, and then they beat themselves up and don't forgive themselves if they go wrong. Well, I really don't think anyone should try and plan out their career because things happen, life happens, mistakes happen, and you can often end up with a much better career than if you'd have followed your plan.
no, I completely agree, and I think that's increasingly the case as well. When I think back to my career as a journalist, the first job I had in the organisation I work for today was as the print production editor of a magazine about personal computers, desktop computers. None of those things exist anymore. Like, and the career path at the time, like, doesn't exist, went away, kind of thing. And so that's one factor, but also exactly to your point, even if you can map out that career path, like, what success is might change for
Mm.
you. Family
Exactly.
circumstances,
Yeah.
relationships, economics, all these things, can change. And the thing you
Mm.
think you want might not be what you wanted. Um, and also, you don't know until you know, like
Yeah.
what's that. So I think what's
Yeah.
really interesting about you, Emma, is you clearly, and you've mentioned it several times, this idea of the optimism. Um, which I think, although I will say the reply to all thing, and I have a story about that I cannot tell, but it involves me replying to every single employee of the Press Association, which is many thousands,
Oh.
um, and just about escaping with a job at the time. Um,
Ugh.
but the only thing you can learn from that, even with great optimism, is just check and don't reply to
I
all.
know. I know. But so I've just thought of another thing actually. So uh, one of the things that we try and do is we try and employ people who are unemployed. We try and
Mhm.
get over the barriers to employment. And that was driven by my daughter who had a breakdown when she was 14 because she was undiagnosed autistic. So we try and find people who are great at their jobs but have unforeseen barriers.
Yeah,
And so we run a training course, a free training course for unemployed adults who've got barriers to employment. And we often recruit from that training course. And the very first time we ran it, there was 14 people on the training course. They were all autistic or they were neurodivergent in some way, mostly autistic. And we
uh,
recruited them all. And we didn't really have a good way of working out who was right for the course and who wasn't at that point. We just recruited them all and we put them all in one group and we just thought that, oh, because they're neurodivergent, they must be technical and they must work together well. You know,
yeah,
big mistake, big mistake. So that could be seen as a mistake, but actually it was the start of us learning. And
yeah,
now, in our whole company, half of our company is neurodivergent, and we have loads and loads and loads of stuff we do to support them. But we wouldn't be now if we hadn't
yeah,
started there. So yeah,
yeah.
you're right, just learning.
And and there probably wasn't somewhere to go to get that information either, right?
No.
Because there isn't a one size fits all solution to that issue, and also we are learning every day and all the time how better to adapt what is actually a far greater. I mean, I love the term neurodivergence, but I also think divergence from what, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like
Well,
like
yeah.
it's about recognizing need, and it's about
Mhm.
understanding what is the version of the wheelchair ramp for each individual to get them into the building, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, great example, because in good faith you went into a thing, it didn't work out, but you learned from it and developed, right, and things got better from there. And maybe that's an example of one of the other questions we like to ask, which is, the first time you realized something you thought you knew
Yeah.
may have been wrong.
Yeah, that totally is that. All the things that I thought I knew about supporting people
Mhm.
were wrong. So we actually had somebody we have a person that we employ that's only job is to support people, and they were employed to support the neurodivergent cohort. And then of course we had COVID, and the neurodivergent cohort were actually fine. They were
Yeah.
often very happy working at home by themselves. And it was a lot of the other staff that were really struggling. Some were bereaved and some were lonely, all sorts of issues. And it suddenly hit me that it's not, oh, are you neurodivergent or aren't you? Are you disabled or aren't you? Everyone is a complex individual and people go through different stages of their life. And at
Mhm.
different parts of your life, you need different support. and it sounds so obvious now, doesn't it? But at the time, it was like a light bulb moment. Like, oh, everyone is just different. And you have to manage everybody in a different way. And that's the key.
Yeah, on every given day as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I think actually that period of life has been a great learning experience for us all and quite a traumatic learning experience for us all. But even, prior to that, I remember a really good HR person from a management perspective sort of pointing out that we all presume we are ourselves on our best day every day. And in
Yeah.
fact, we're not. We're a mess, right? We're a massive, complex bunch of needs, and like we all get hangry. we all,
Oh, yeah.
even as banal as that, right? And so any kind of empathetic interaction with other people, certainly in a business context, if the end goal is that we all succeed as a team, you need to always be thinking about and adjusting for yourself and for other people and for your needs and their needs. And to your point, like this is why, again, I embrace the term neurodivergent because I think it's helping us figure these things out in a much better and empathetic way. But it is also a little bit like the spectrum. It is in some ways also wonderfully meaningless because we're all
Yeah.
divergent, like within ourselves and, whilst also recognizing our own privilege that many of us have it a lot easier than others.
Yeah.
Uh, Fascinating. Um, fascinating, very successful, very interesting. We've had enough of that now, right? We're going to
Mhm.
go over to section three, which we call quickfire first, because we want to get to know you a little bit beyond the professional veneer. And to do
Uh-oh.
this, we use our, we use our patented random question generator. So if you if you wouldn't mind, Emma, if you could pick a number between 1 and 14, please.
6, please.
Number 6. Would you be able to tell us something about, your first home, Emma?
My first home. Oh my gosh. So when I was a child, my dad worked for overseas aid, developing new
Oh,
kinds of cow. And so we traveled around the world a lot. So I was born in Kenya, we lived in Nigeria, Australia, various different places. So I have bizarre memories as a child.
yeah.
My first home, I don't know, my first memories are from when we lived in Nigeria.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, and my first memory ever actually is when my dad was away traveling, the the government would pay for somebody to guard our house for us. And it was this big black guy in just like a sort of a loincloth and Wellington boots with a sword. And
Huh.
one of my first memories was him lifting me out of the car when we got home. Now it wasn't, I wasn't frightened or anything, but
Yeah,
it's just a sort of an unusual, an
yeah.
unusual memory.
A striking. That is one of the random questions actually, is first memory, and it's amazing. I live in fear of when this little section goes wrong, but it sort of never does because interesting people always have an interesting answer. We've asked first home several times.
Mhm.
Nobody's ever said, that they were traveling around the world for their father to develop a new type of cow. Um,
Well, good.
what a fascinating insight. And yeah, and I love that idea of the first memory because it's like you can sense the kind of vivid visual of it, and also you can
Mhm.
you can remember your feeling around that moment, right?
Yes, and
There's
it was
some
a very coming home safe memory,
yeah,
even though it
yeah.
feels unusual now.
Yeah, 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 that's amazing, and a universal experience, right? Go on
Yeah.
then, let's see if we can get another interesting,
Number
out
6.
num
No, number 12, number 12, just
number
repeating myself.
12. Okay, very different. What's the first thing you would save if your house was on fire?
Oh, well, my pets.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
yeah, my pets, definitely.
Tell me about your pets.
Well, so I've got a very elderly cat who was a stray cat in Singapore. So we
Huh,
adopted him in Singapore, and then we moved to Italy, and then we moved to the UK. So he had
wow.
to, have the whole rabies jabs and
Yeah.
everything. So my husband always says he's the most expensive stray cat ever. He really
We
is. Yeah.
we
So,
have a cat who grew up on the streets of Tunisia. Um,
ah,
Such is the nature of, the country we both live in, Emma,
mhm,
that there is a charity that imports stray cats from Tunisia. Now,
of
you
course.
might argue that isn't the greatest use of, humanity's resources, but it had already happened, so we figured that was better than, taking a cat from a breeder or anything like that. But I do always, I always think that, like, what a bizarre life that must have been to have been a stray on the streets of Tunisia to now living in a leafy village in Surrey. It's a very
Well, our cat used
Very
to, when we first moved to Italy, so of course he'd gone from Singapore, very, very hot, that's all he'd
yeah,
known. We moved to Italy and we were staying in this little gatehouse overlooking a lake where there were swans. And the poor cat, for the first month, every time he saw the swans out of the window, he got a nosebleed because he was
Yeah.
so anxious at the sight of a
Yeah.
swan. So yeah, very, very
I
strange for him.
I grew up on a council estate, between Leeds and Bradford. I mean, the sight of a swan is terrifying to me also. Um,
Yes.
those things can take your arm off. So I'm with your cat. It's a sensible, approach.
Yes.
Okay, amazing. Thank you for sharing those insights and information. This is what we like. It's interesting. So let's
Oh,
move to
good.
section 4, which we call our first and final thoughts. And I'm really interested to hear, Emma, what you would give as the first piece of advice you would give to someone who's just starting out today.
Well, I mean, I kind of covered it already,
Mm.
but don't worry about things that go wrong. If you're planning something and you don't get it, you don't get the job, you don't get the promotion, it's okay because the path is meandery. And it
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It could be a good
yeah,
thing. And seize the opportunity. Always volunteer for things. Always be on the lookout for things. Look for the gaps. So if everyone is going in one direction, go in the other direction. That's where the exciting opportunities are. And it
yeah,
doesn't matter if you're different. If you're different, you will be listened to. Your
yeah.
voice is, if your voice is different or you are different, people will notice you more. So it's all good.
I mean, it's really good advice just on a human level. I also think on a professional level right now, uh, to be a little bit tactical, actually, like the way everyone kind of views generative and agentic AI, um, it's quite vanilla, right? People think about doing the same things faster.
Yeah,
And like the creativity and the opportunity out there is for people who can think differently. And
exactly.
so I think it's excellent advice. I think I might know the answer to this, but I'd be interested to dig into it a little bit. But what's the first project or achievement you would want to tell people about? What's Emma's masterpiece?
So, yes, my masterpiece is IASME, our company, um, because not because we made a profit. So we exited 2.5 years ago, not because of that, not because we make a profit, not because we're the sole delivery partner for the government. That's all good. But what I am most proud of is our diversity. So
Mhm.
30% so we've got 120 people. 30% were unemployed when we took them on. Many of them are
Wow.
long-term unemployed, and almost 50% are neurodivergent, with a growing number of people in the organization that have got physical disabilities, either like full time physical disabilities like cerebral palsy, or they've got something like Crohn's disease where they can work fine for
Yeah.
several months. And then for several months, they might be in hospital. So, I think it's up to us, business owners, to make sure that people like that can have a really good, worthwhile career, and they're often really good. So if you're saying, "Oh no, I'm sorry, you can't work for us if you can't, if
Yeah.
you have a lot of sick time," you're just canceling a whole load of people that could be
Yeah.
really, really good for your company. So
Yeah.
I think trying to do different things differently, that's what I'm proud of.
Yeah. No, it's very, very cool and such a great story. And one of the reasons we were excited to have this conversation today, because exactly to your point, right? Doesn't matter which way you want to look at this. Doing the right thing is the right thing to do.
Yeah,
Because otherwise, in making people bend to some outmoded view of what the workplace is, you're excluding talent from your organization.
exactly.
Um,
And we don't do it to be nice.
mhm,
We this isn't something that we do to be nice to society. We do it because we make a lot of profit and we're very successful,
yeah,
because of the diversity of background and thought. So if we come up with a problem, always a problem, I rack my brains and I can't think of what to do. I put it out to the organization, and the ideas and innovation that comes back is absolutely incredible. So, and we wouldn't have that if we weren't diverse.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
the success of us as a company, financially, profitably, everything else, is down to our diversity. Definitely.
yeah. Such a cool message, I think, and there's a danger right now that that gets lost a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for you for coming on and talking to us about that and saying that is excellent advice for our viewers and listeners. And before we let you go, we'll ask you our only non-first questions, and it's the widest question you could possibly ask. Do you have any final thoughts you would like to share with our audience, Emma?
Well, not specific final thoughts, just enjoy the ride. You know,
Mhm.
the world can seem really grim at times, and the news is also negative and it's awful. And you see, you can let it get to you, which it should for a bit, but
Mhm.
this is it. There's no wishing it was different. This is how it is. And so all we can do is do our best and enjoy the
Yeah.
ride.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. I sort of find myself increasingly, taking joy and pleasure in, interactions with human beings. Because you know
Yeah.
what? Like the people I know and meet, you know, I was gonna say good, bad, or indifferent. Actually, generally speaking, everyone starts from a good place.
Yeah.
And like that's a thing to take joy from and just remember that is the world that we live in kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, my thanks to Emma Philpott MBE, and thanks to you for watching or listening to First Person, the show where we meet, and I think you'll agree, the most interesting people in IT and learn from them what makes them tick by focusing only on their firsts. I have been your host, Matt Egan, asking you to enjoy, like, and subscribe wherever you find us. And if you're an interesting person in IT, do let us know. You might be the next first person. And with that, I would say goodbye and my thanks to Emma, and goodbye.